For more than a quarter of a century, two men have become almost synonymous with power in football on either side of the Atlantic. Gianni Infantino has spent the last decade consolidating his control over FIFA, expanding the World Cup, increasing FIFA's commercial reach, and becoming arguably the most powerful man in global football.
On the other side of the Atlantic, Don Garber has run Major League Soccer since 1999, taking a league that was losing hundreds of millions of dollars and helping turn the 30-team business with clubs now valued at more than $1 billion. So today on Finance of Football, we're talking about power.
I'm Asli, the athletic soccer writer.
And I'm veteran sports journalist Michael Array. Welcome to Finance of Football.
Welcome back to Finance of Football. As of last week, the future suddenly looks different for both men, Michael. I think Infantino is facing perhaps the biggest challenge to his authority since becoming FIFA president. I think his controversial attempt to sell a stake in the World Cup collapsed after fierce opposition. UEFA remains in open conflict with him. FIFPro has accused him of an abuse of power, and some national federations are now publicly questioning whether he should remain FIFA president. In other words, after years of watching this man, Infantino, accumulate power, we may finally be watching some of it slip away.
It's all come from the FIFA Forward enterprise, which basically FIFA has proposed creating a new commercial subsidiary valued at around $20 billion that would then consolidate the commercial and event operations around FIFA competitions, including the FIFA World Cup, which we just saw this summer was the biggest sporting event in the history of mankind, right? And the plan was to sell minority stakes in this enterprise up to 20% to outside investors and raise as much as $4.2 billion. And with that comes a lot of money, and it comes a lot of dangling of carrots in front of these federations, right? And it's not just here's $1 million, here's $2 million, that kind of thing. If I'm not mistaken, it was potentially $40 million per federation that Infantino was sitting here promising, guaranteeing these different federations. And I think it's led to kind of a 50-50 split almost between the confederations that make up global soccer.
And I think to understand what he's doing here, let's go back a little bit and see how he came to power. He was elected, and I would say election is a very vague word exactly, between, he actually got into power in an emergency situation. If you remember, after the 2014 World Cup in Brazil, in 2016, the end of Sepp Blatter's regime came to an end. And since then, FIFA just became richer. The Men's World Cup expanded from 32 to 48 teams. They created more competitions. Who can forget last summer's Club World Cup? And Infantino has built a political base among the 211 national federations that actually made him, then the second time around when it came for elections, a president that came to power with majority of the votes. And if people do not know the details of that, FIFA has 211 members, and whoever gets most of the votes becomes the president. And by giving out, I would say, gifts.
Are we calling them favors, bribes, gifts?
Bribes,
like, how do
gifts.
we want to describe these? Because they're all the same thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. So if you invite everybody to an all-inclusive event right before the World Cup in Miami, 5-star hotels, give them entertainment, hanging up the famous people, and say, hey, look at me, what I'm giving to you, I provide for you, I take care of you, and even promising countries finals to host a final of World Cup. I feel like these federations are inclined to keep him in power just because it benefits them in a way.
Yeah, 100%. And I think going back to your point too, just explaining about how FIFA operates with those 211 national federations, each one of them gets a vote, right? So England's vote is the same amount as the United States, is the same amount as Brazil, is the same amount as Cabo Verde. Every country that's a member of FIFA gets a vote. So it doesn't matter how much money you bring in. It doesn't matter how big you are. It doesn't matter how many World Cup champion titles you've won. You get one vote So in the growth of FIFA, and we've seen it with the World Cup in Russia, the World Cup in Qatar, coming to Saudi Arabia in a couple years as well too, that there are these incentives for some of these nations that Infantino's promising them to say, hey, if you back me, I will get you the World Cup in 8 years. If you back me, I will bring you X amount of money. If you back me, I will give you all of the riches and the glories and all of these amazing things. And Sepp Blatter did the same thing, back to your point as well too, but he got caught because it was corruption, that there was literally
Oh
exchanging
yeah.
of money and envelopes and cash. And if you vote for me, I will give you this and I will do all those things. But Infantino's doing it. I don't want to say he's doing it above board because I don't think corruption can be above board, but he's doing it in a way that, and we're seeing it with this, proposed the FIFA enterprises here saying, I can give you $40 million if you let me do X, Y, and Z. So why wouldn't these nations and these federations sit here and say $40 million? Yeah, sign me up. Where do I do that? And we've seen since this has come out, and it's kind of similar to the Super League that we saw
Oh my God,
rise to
similar.
prominence however many years ago, and oh, it's going to bring all this money into the game, and it's great. And then you have FC Barcelona and Real Madrid and Arsenal, and the biggest teams say, yeah, we can make more money than ever. That sounds great. But the fans say, oh, we don't like that. So you're sitting here looking at the federations that comprise FIFA. UEFA were the first ones to speak out, right? They said this is not a good idea. They have 55 federations, member federations. They were boycott. They said we will boycott every FIFA-backed event, starting with the Women's World Cup, right, coming up
Which was so
in the next
crazy.
summer, which is crazy. But they really they were the first ones to come out and say something, which again, kudos to them, because I feel a lot of folks were, well, we don't really know, and I don't know what to think about this, and let's see what other people do. And it takes somebody to be the first, right? It's always hard to be the first because you're the first one out there by yourself, and everybody else might leave you out there to dry. But UEFA does it, and then Concacaf, right, where the U.S. is a member, they came out and said, we kind of agree with UEFA. We don't really like this, and the fact that you didn't consult us. And I feel that was the biggest issue. It wasn't
Exactly.
it wasn't about selling football. It was about the fact that people weren't consulted by this kind of mutiny or schism or this big project that Infantino and I assume others at FIFA wanted to do.
He didn't even consult FIFA Council. And we're not talking about like he didn't consulted with the 211 members before putting together a very robust proposal. He did hide it from the FIFA Council, which is clearly almost like let's think about this as a democracy, and you have a president, or let's say prime minister, whatever you have, and then you have a parliament. So you as a president single-handedly create a project to sell some part of your country, and you do not consult with your parliamentary members. That's what was happening at FIFA. And I feel like that is what actually turned everybody against Gianni Infantino. And I agree with you. UEFA was super smart to come against this proposal, like somebody who had the courage to stand up and say, okay, this has to end right here. Like, we will not participate in your projects anymore because you're now, pissing us off.
Yeah, exactly. And it blows my mind too, because if I'm Gianni Infantino and this is something I want to do, wouldn't you sit there and at least talk to a couple people to get some backing from them and say, okay, well, I want to do this, but so does England, and so does Argentina, and so does Cameroon. Like, you're backed by at least a couple of these countries or a couple of the federations. But instead he comes out kind of on his own and says, hey guys, I have this great plan, who's interested? And everyone goes, well, this is the first we've ever heard of this. Like, no, of course we're not. But then you have the rest of the world who goes, you know what, this is actually a good idea, right? The Confederation of African Football, they confirmed its support of Infantino with 50, that's 54 votes. That's a ton. That's almost as much as UEFA, right? UEFA's 55, Africa's 54, and they're coming out and saying, yeah, we could use this money.
I feel like what happened, yes, the African nations always back up FIFA, but what happened after the crisis with UEFA and Concacaf is FIFA's leadership held a crisis meeting in all places in Morocco during WAFCON, Women's African Confederation tournament. And afterward, FIFA acknowledged that mistakes had been made and sent an apology to its 211 member associations over the way the proposal had been handled. They didn't say this is a bad idea. They just said that we handled it wrong, which is very important. And FIFA still said the leadership is still supporting Infantino. And when coming back to your point about 54, when you count all the votes, I think if they go into a election tomorrow, I think Infantino still has a chance to win. Would that happen? I feel like the person who's going to run against him has to come up with a more robust plan of governance and also perhaps change things around. Like, can we not make the world's biggest global football organization more transparent? I would love this organization to run more transparently if possible.
Listen, I wholeheartedly agree. I think everything needs to be more transparent, right? But we ran into this issue back in 2016, like you said, with Sepp Blatter, where the FBI goes in and they raid, hotel rooms, and they're bringing delegates out with, covers over their heads, so we didn't know who they were, and it's like, we know who you are. And then FIFA goes, oh, we're gonna self-regulate, we're gonna create this committee, we're gonna do all this stuff. But again, if you're just kind of doing it internally, no one is really checking on you. What are the checks and balances? No one can check on FIFA, but they'll sit here and say, oh, yeah, well, we have this committee, they're checking on us, and we're good to go. Meanwhile, do you think that committee is completely, unscathed and unaware of all of these things that are going on? No, of course not. So it's a very difficult situation that FIFA is the most powerful body in global soccer, right? Men's, women's, everything, you name it. So who checks them? No one. So they can do pretty much whatever they want as long as those 211 member nations are pleased. And that's why the African, nations are like, great, we will take all that money because we can use it, whether it's for infrastructure or building up facilities or pocketing it, however they want to do it, which again, we've seen in the past, they want to do that. In Asia, you have the blocks of countries in the Middle East from Qatar and the UAE, Saudi Arabia. They're all in on Gianni Infantino. Well, I wonder why. Qatar just hosted the World Cup in 2022. Saudi Arabia is going to host the World Cup in 2034. So it's like, of course, he's giving them something because he's getting something in return. It's a very transactional relationship. And it's just like, I hate to say it's buying votes, but it's kind of buying votes. So
Yeah, it's buying votes.
Right, 1,000%. So where we go from here, I think is it's going to shape the future of global soccer for years, if not decades to come. I think it's been very interesting that as the dust is kind of settling on this a little bit, FIFA keeps coming out with these statements, attributed to a FIFA spokesperson, and they're very much like, oh, there's a concerted effort to undermine Gianni Infantino. And I'm like, he's writing these, or his PR people are writing these, and they're trying to just drum up some good publicity, thinking that other people are attacking him, where it's like he's created this problem himself, right? Again, whether it's a lack of transparency or it's the fact that he is trying to privatize global soccer, and then now all of a sudden he's on the defense saying, oh, I'm the scapegoat, you guys are coming out of me. Well, when you're in the position that you're in and you're Gianni Infantino, you're taking the good, you're taking the bad, you're taking everything in between. So take accountability in this situation and say, I messed up. How do we move forward with the purpose and the goal, the North Star of this, to make global soccer as best as it can be, and not just a billionaire game, but a game for the blue collar worker, which is how it started. But he's not going to sit there and do that because he's going to sit there and see the other B, which is involved, which is billions. And I'm talking billions of dollars.
Yeah. So to sum it up, what can happen to the future of FIFA here is, so I feel like March 2027, when you're going into voting for their next president, first of all, it's not that much time, but if a candidate rises up, actually, maybe 2 months ago, that person had no chance of winning the elections. Maybe they will have, with a great campaign, with a promise to run this organization better, more transparent, and still, I feel like it's never going back to be a blue-collar organization in sport. Like that, we passed that, threshold a long time ago. But making it more accessible will be, I think, should be the promise of this next candidate. Instead of making it only for a group of elites, how can we turn it around and actually give an opportunity to masses, millions of real soccer fans to actually attend these events? That's the person who might be able to win against Infantino. I also feel like UEFA had a long running problem with Gianni Infantino, especially after Club World Cup, because they're very concerned about the well-being of their players for their national tournaments, for European leagues, and also Champions League. They don't want to jeopardize that product that is perhaps the only product that can really compete with the World Cup when you think about it commercially, because people love the Champions League. So now his opponents have to make a different argument. That generating more money should not give FIFA president unlimited authority over how the institution is governed. That's like has to go out the window, and then it will ultimately become a hero, an opposition leader, a Mamdani of FIFA, so to speak, to come and change this organization around. And that person maybe has to be from a non-European nation, right? Why do they always have to be Europeans? What if we find someone from Asia or Africa to run this organization that can bring those federations together, not by promising them cash, gifts, favors, but saying, I'm going to represent your, needs, and I'm going to bring them to the table. I'm going to really distribute money to your youth organizations, because I think there's also like a systematic problem with football in general around the world, because the federations that are responsible for growing the sport in their own country, not necessarily taking these jobs to finish that promise, but also filling their pockets because it's so lucrative, So I feel like I see the hope from where I'm sitting today. But I'm also cautious that, Gianni Infantino can pull another rabbit from his pocket last minute and shock and surprise all of us, right?
If by rabbit you mean a big fat check, then yeah, he probably can, let's be honest.
Yeah, and let's take another hydration break and come back right after this. Welcome back to Finance of Football. And Michael, I think this is something that we need to really focus here in the United States, because MLS has a new commissioner, and let's unpack why MLS owners chose a private equity investor to lead the league into his post-Garber and post-World Cup 2026 era. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, as we were talking about earlier in the episode, the status of FIFA and who's going to lead FIFA is up in the air. Obviously Infantino is still in charge until maybe he isn't with the upcoming election in March of 2027. But MLS, their future is known. They know what direction they're going in. Don Garber has, steered that ship for the last 30 years. And beginning January 1st, 2027, Larry Berg will be the new commissioner of Major League Soccer. He is a private equity investor with a background. He's got 3 decades at Apollo Global Management before retiring from the firm in 2022, and then he joined investment firm 26 North. And through all that, he's been invested in soccer, which is great, right? He's a co-managing owner of LAFC.
LAFC.
Yep, he's held investments in Roma and Swansea City, and he's co-chair of MLS's Sporting and Competition Committee. So he understands what the task is, right? He is not an outsider to MLS. He's not an outsider to U.S. soccer. He has been as much part of it as any of the other potential candidates, Garber replacements. And so now it's just interesting where, Don Garber came into the league in 1999. He came over from the NFL, as a lot of other sport executives seem to be doing. His job when he first joined MLS, it was survival, right? The league was losing a ton of money. All these families were putting money into the different teams, and there was no TV rights.
Nobody was watching football.
Nobody was watching it, right? Exactly. In 1990, well, they were watching football. They were watching American football. They weren't watching soccer. And it was about survival. And then you look at the job he's done, and whether you love, hate, or indifferent about MLS now in 2026, as we turn the page soon to 2027, you can't not appreciate what Don Garber has done for this league. Because I think anybody else, that the league probably would have folded, right?
I always remember something that Don Garber said to one of my coworkers, Paul Tenorio, recently in an interview. we cannot be Premier League, we cannot be La Liga or Bundesliga. But why not? We can be the sixth best league in the world. And Larry Bird's job is to make this league that sixth best league. And I feel like it's not an easy task.
No, of course not, right? And again, the task that Larry has is completely different to what Don Garber had 30 some years ago. Messi coming to MLS, they did the same thing with David Beckham all those years ago, right? Like what Beckham did for the league and gave it that global kind of awareness has been magnified exponentially because of the star power that Lionel Messi has over David Beckham. So for Larry Berg, in order to get the league more validity and just a place in global soccer, you need to go beyond, like you said, these aging stars to come over, right? Robert Lewandowski just signed with Chicago Fire, Antoine Griezmann with Orlando. That's great, right? If you're a soccer fan and you go, hey, I can pay $50 to go see this guy play in my backyard, of course I'm going to do it. But these guys aren't going to play forever. Lionel Messi is not going to play forever. So you need to think about what is next. Do you go out and try to sign in Erling Haaland in 5 to 10 years from now? I feel every international soccer star, especially when they were in the United States and North America for the World Cup, people would always say, hey, could you see yourself playing in MLS? And they're like, yeah, maybe, blah, blah, blah. I think Lamine Yamal even said it. He's 18, 19 years old. He's not thinking about where he's going to play 20 years from now. Who knows what MLS is going to look like 20 years from now? But in order to do that, to be attractive to sponsors, to be attractive to players and all of that stuff, it's TV rights, it's media rights.
Which is the biggest, first project he has at hand, right? Because the MLS and Apple deal is running through the 2028-29 season. So what he has a year and a change to find an adequate media partner that will take this league and make it a commercially viable broadcast product.
Yeah, and the league's looking for about $400 to $500 million for this deal. For the Apple deal, it was a global rights deal at $2.5 billion over 10 years, which again, those sound like big sexy numbers, but when you break it up, where they have
between 30.
Exactly, when you have one broadcaster and you're breaking it up over 30 teams, and it wasn't as good as it sounded. I think the other thing too, we're seeing a lot of changes. It's going to be MLS 3.0, where the calendar is changing, the salary cap, and all of those other roster rules look like. It's great that MLS is going to align with pretty much the rest of the world in terms of their competition calendar. But how do you compete for those young stars? How do you compete and sign a Haaland and a Lamine Yamal or the next version of those guys? And it's not going to be, well, you can come here and be a DP player and we'll give you $3 million a year and X amount per ticket sales and blah, blah. Like, you need to give these guys the big money contracts that they're going to get at a Man City or a Barcelona or an Arsenal or a PSG. And in order to do that, you need massive TV distribution, because in order to get that means you have viewers, that means you have sponsors, just more money involved in the game. That's why we see the Premier League has so much money and these clubs are spending astronomical amounts.
Exactly.
And that's why they're getting the biggest stars.
Yeah, they have to, Larry Berg has to find a way to get rid of salary cap in order to bring those stars. Because football players don't care where they play as long as they get paid. So look at what happened with Ronaldo in Saudi Arabia, which was, by the way, another big gossip, is whether or not he's going to try to come and play right now in MLS, But I'm thinking, they cannot promise these people franchises the way they promised to Beckham. So they have to pay them better. And that will shake, I think, so many things within the MLS ecosystem, because in order for the valuations to go up, salary cap has to exist. So I feel like when I look at sometimes these valuations, I look at them as almost a number on a piece of paper more than real value. First of all, they don't have fans the way European clubs do. They don't have, like you said, a commercially viable broadcast product. And just by maintaining a salary cap, okay, they're not losing money, but this is only because somebody's controlling how they're spending the money. As soon as that control goes out the window and they cannot control how they're spending money, all these clubs will go under in terms of, in their P&L. They won't be showing positive, revenue every year if they start paying Haaland level salaries to players. So that is something that this investor, private equity guy who has experience operating teams as well need to solve. And I'm super curious to see what his solution is going to be.
And you know what? You kind of gave me an idea, and I don't know if this makes any business sense at all, but you talked about the deal that Beckham got and the foresight to say, okay, I'll come in and I'll make this, and you give me a discount if I want to do an expansion team, which he's obviously done with Inter Miami, with the Moss brothers, and they brought in Messi. Why don't you keep that going? Why don't you tell Lionel Messi, who comes in, and say, great, we'll give you a deal, we'll give you a cut of Apple revenue and Adidas, jersey revenue, that kind of stuff. We'll give you a discount on an expansion team. Now Messi is a team owner. Okay, we're going to bring in Haaland. We're going to bring in Lamine Yamal. Now you have these superstars, these global superstars who are now the face of your franchise, not only as a player, but as an owner, right? Like,
in order to do that, then they have to also bring relegation and promotion, Michael, because how many teams can you add to just the first division league?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a whole nother can of worms. I know everyone's sitting here, oh, in order for the league to survive, it needs promotion and relegation. But let me tell you this, if you're ponying up $600 million just for the expansion rights to bring a team in, then it's a new stadium, it's new training facilities, it's all of that on top of the salaries and everything else. So you're in for at least $1 billion. And now I tell you, oh, by the way, you might get relegated to the second division. Are you going to sign up for that? Hell no. LA Galaxy they won MLS Cup and then they were the worst team in the league. Hey, you think they want to get relegated? Like, that's not going to happen, especially as you're investing more and more money into this. But, it's such a tough spot. And, but no offense, I'd rather be Larry Berg than Gianni Infantino, because I think while they both have very tough tasks ahead of them, I think Larry's is slightly easier because the stakes aren't as high. He doesn't have global soccer resting on his shoulders and what that future holds. He has MLS. MLS, someone will come in, whether it's more private equity or whatever the situation is. Someone will come in and rescue MLS like Don Garber did in 1999. What Gianni Infantino has ahead of him, I wouldn't want it. You can give me the $40 million he's promising to these federations, and I'd probably be like, it's a little too much for me. I'm great enough as it is. I don't think I would want to deal with that. Maybe that's why he lost his hair. Maybe that's how that happened. I don't know.
And that stays for another episode. Thank you for joining. This is an amazing episode. I feel like there's so much more to talk about. As soon as we can, I don't know, in a few months from now, we start watching Larry Berg and his plan for this league. And meanwhile, probably at the same time, we'll see what happens to our balding friend, Gianni Infantino.
Buckle up, folks.
Finance of Football comes to you from the Frequency Machine Podcast Network. Hit us up on Instagram and YouTube at Finance of Football Pod for more football business and our enlightened opinions. Or search Finance of Football on LinkedIn and Facebook. This episode was produced by co-hosts Michael Array and Asli Pellet. It was edited by Ryan Hammond. Mixing and mastering by Julian Kwasniewski. Our theme music is by Hatamit Tsunami. Our show is executive produced by Ryan, alongside Stacy Book and Avi Glajansky for Frequency Machine. Find more about Finance of Football at frequencymachine.com. Follow us on YouTube at Finance of Football and listen anywhere you get podcasts. Please like and subscribe. Help us reach more people. We love you for it.